Hi there, and welcome to Just Films and That, the podcast that celebrates films we think are underrated, underseen, or we just really, really wanted to talk about them. I'm your host for this week, Alice Oliver. With me, as always, is Josh Hallam, and it was his turn to pick the film this week, and he went with Jersey Girl from 2004. So, let's get stuck in. So, Josh, you picked this week's film, Jersey Girl from 2004. So, spoiler warning, listeners, if you haven't seen it, Josh, tell us, what is the film about and why did you pick it?
Jersey Girl is a Kevin Smith film from 2004, as you've already said, which stars Ben Affleck, as many of Kevin Smith films do. Ben Affleck plays a young up-and-coming PR agent in the 90s called Ollie Trinky. He meets a lady played by Jennifer Lopez called Gertrude. They fall in love, they get engaged, she gets pregnant, and then very sadly she dies in childbirth, leaving Ben Affleck as a young, widowed father of a young baby girl, also called Gertrude. So this leads him to try and carry on his life as normal. He then has a bit of an outburst in the 90s again, whilst trying to work on the career of a young up-and-coming actor named Will Smith. Exactly whatever happened to him. Cut to many years later where he is sort of disgraced from his job and he's raising his young daughter whilst living with his dad in Highlands, New Jersey. And then the film is just about their relationship, really. I picked this for a few reasons. So mainly, I think this is underrated. So when this came out, it got quite the kick-in.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
It got quite the kick-in when it came out. And I don't know if you remember around the time, it was around the time when Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez were a couple. Bennifer, as you may remember. And they did a film.
The hottest shit in town.
They were,
right?
and they did a film called Geely, which is often up there with like one of the worst films of all time. I think and that is one of a few films around that time that temporarily, we must say now, did, let's say, kill Ben Affleck's career for a little while before he sort of he remodeled himself as a writer and a director, and now
Batman, man, come on.
And then he was Batman, and now he's doing very, very well for himself again.
And is he back with J-Lo now?
I think they're back together. I don't really follow the celebrity gossip or whatever you want to call it.
That surprises me, Josh.
But the fact of the matter is I spend a lot of time managing the podcast Twitter and Instagram, and when half your stuff is based on films, it's impossible to see that Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez are, I think, back together. Lovely stuff. So I picked it because it got a real kicking when it came out, and I think it's not a perfect film, but I think there's a lot to like in there. I think it's quite sweet, and I think it deserves another look, and I think it's underrated. I've seen the critical reception, which we'll obviously come on to later, and I think it's pretty criminally underrated, which you've not seen, but we'll come on to. So I know from conversations outside of this podcast, surprise, we do actually have conversations outside of this podcast sometimes, mainly when we're recording the next podcast. But every now and then we do see each other in person. And I know that your other half, Mr. Oliver, is quite a Kevin Smith fan.
Oh, huge. Yes. His favourite film, I think, is Clerks 2.
It is. I think it is. I think he has told me that himself because I think he clocked it on my DVD shelf once and saw it. So
there's Underseen, if you want to talk about Underseen.
So with that in mind, I'd be surprised. Have you seen this?
No, I hadn't. This is one that I hadn't seen. Yeah, no, I hadn't seen it. Hadn't, like, a vague idea of it, but, not really. I don't think it had really probably been on my radar at all. I do like Kevin Smith. I love Jay and Silent Bob. Really like Dogma as well. I watched that again recently, and I thought that really holds up. So I was definitely interested going into this.
Yeah, so that's another reason I wanted to pick it as well. Is I'm quite a big fan of Kevin Smith as a writer, as a director. Just like some of his podcasts as well are really good. And I wanted to do one of his films, and I think of all his films, I'm not a huge fan / haven't seen a lot of his more recent films, but if you look at the stuff he did around this time, from sort of Clerks to Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, which is what he calls his view askew films, and there are more in that which he's made more recently, but then Jersey Girl was, I think, the first film he made outside of that he'd written. It is, of course, written in mind with the fact that he'd recently lost his dad when he wrote the film as well, so it's quite a personal film for him, and it's written about his relationship with fatherhood, I think. So that's why there's a lot of sons and daughters and fathers and sons stuff going on in this.
There is, yeah.
And what that's another reason why I wanted to pick it, because I do really like a lot of his work. So let's get into it then. I really really want to know. I'm chomping at the bit here because you've got my evening in your hands here. You could ruin it,
go on.
Or you could make it.
Ooh, the power.
What did you think? What did you think?
I thought it was all right.
Yeah?
Yeah, like I thought it was fine. Right. I think you sort of touched on it a bit there. It's kind of fun, it's sort of harmless, it's quite cute, it's quite low stakes.
Yeah.
You've got a real range from Affleck here, I think he gives a great performance for something that is billed as a romantic comedy. There is a couple more layers to it. Obviously, they dropped the bombshell of killing off Jennifer Lopez pretty early on. I wasn't expecting that. I always appreciate it when a film does something I just ain't expecting, because within like the first 5 or 10 minutes of a film, you sort of piece it together in your mind, don't you? It's like, oh yeah, he's the hero, she's this, they're that, we kind of know where this is going. So they killed her off and I was like, oh cool, bold, I like it. You've got J-Lo in just for 10 minutes or whatever it was. So then Affleck has to go from being this kind of yuppie sort of
hotshot, and he's like
he's a bit of a hotshot. He's a bit of a dickhead. He's a bit cocky. Like, he doesn't seem like the greatest guy. Everything's just like really casual and off the cuff or whatever. And then his wife, who they develop. You believe that they're in love, like you believe that they do love each other. I think Kevin Smith does a great job at bringing that out of them. Obviously, if they were together at the time, that probably helps.
Yeah.
But you establish their relationship in quite a short space of time. Reminded me a little bit of the opening of Up.
Yeah, with, a little bit.
You get a lot from those two characters. No, it's not quite as cute. But you get a lot from those two characters in a short space of time. They're quite passionate. They're quite lustful for one another. They obviously really fancy each other as well as being in love. And then she dies. And he's got to deal with that. She dies in childbirth. So now he has a daughter.
Which you don't see that often either. It's
grim.
I mean, I know that's because it's not very common. Luckily, in this day and age, medicine being what it being, it's not that common. But it's not completely unheard of either. So it's quite interesting to see as well. It's an interesting plot device, I guess.
Oh, certainly. And it's such a profound loss, isn't it?
Yeah.
That what's meant to be potentially the best day of your life. You're meant to be celebrating, bringing this new life into the world. Oh, this is amazing. We're going to start our family. We're going to live happily ever after. But then bam, the woman that you love more than anything in the world is dead. And you see Affleck go from one thing to another. He's waiting sort of in the corridor, just waiting to hear the news. He's smoking a cigarette in the fucking hospital. And
it's the 90s though, isn't
it?
Do you want?
Cigarettes all around.
Yeah. The bare naked ladies blasting out. Having a great time.
Oh yeah, good. It was good. It was good back then, guys. And I just think he did a great job. And he's such a car crash of a father to begin with. Like, he's not great. He's still prioritizing his job against everything. He's not got, or it doesn't seem like he's got many kind of female influences in his life to maybe guide him, to maybe help him along the way.
No mother, lost his mother at a young age. Yeah,
he's obviously never read a book about, being a parent or whatever. He's still trying to work full time at a very high pressure, high powered job and raise his daughter. And it's just a nightmare for him. But then you grow with him, you see him he goes on this bit of a journey. I just thought he did a really good job. I'm a bit 50-50 with Affleck. Like, I wasn't thrilled when he was cast as Batman. I didn't think he did a terrible job, but he's not up there as one of my faves. He's not done loads that I love, but in this I thought he was really good. And have you seen, is it Jay and Silent Bob reboot?
So no, I haven't got around to watching it yet.
So
I've actually got it. It's one of these where I've been and I've got it. Right. But I just haven't got around to watching it yet because I do like those films. I've seen clips and stuff online, so I know he's in it and stuff.
Him and Matt Damon in that are just really, really funny, and that just kind of lit something up in me, like more of an affection for those two characters, I think. And then going back and watching Dogma again, I was like, oh no, actually, I do like this guy. So I thought he did a really good job.
So he's I think he's brilliant in this. I think so unfortunately, and we'll come on to this a little bit around it. Historically, the context of this film is quite important, which is, first of all, it was in that period where journalism particularly was really toxic.
Oh, you mean it's not now?
No, it's not. No,
I say that as a journalist as well.
Yeah, I don't. What I mean is, I suppose it was it was before social media was in everybody's hands on their smartphones and stuff. So it really was the height of papers and magazines just going after people. So they decided, because of a few poor films or films that they decided were poor. And that's one of the things that this podcast is all about. Is I've never seen Geely. I don't know if it's as bad as everyone says it is. And as much as there are bad films out there, we don't pretend that there aren't bad films out there. But ultimately, we try and acknowledge optimism. We try and say that a lot of people quite often work really, really hard on these projects. They're often made with the best of intentions. The flip side of that being is they're also often there to make money. It is a business after all.
Of course.
And as many actors will say, not everything they do has to be brilliant. They do have to get paid. At the end of the day, it is a job.
But also, brilliant by whose standards?
Exactly.
Like, come on, like, you know, what you hate, I love. What I hate, you love. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's such a range.
The papers were really going after Ben Affleck at the time, and they had more or less decided, from what I remember, that he was a bad actor.
Yeah.
And he couldn't act. Now, that isn't, for me, that isn't true. He did turn in some less than good performances, but most actors, I mean, fucking hell, Robert De Niro is one of the best actors ever, arguably the greatest screen actor of all time, up there for many, many people. He still made Dirty Grandpa.
Yeah.
He's still done bad performances because it happens and it's not the end of the world and whatever. But Ben Affleck is not a bad actor. He has done good films. He did make good films before Jersey Girl. He made good films after Jersey Girl. He is brilliant in Good Will Hunting. I think he's brilliant in Jersey Girl. I think he's really good in Argo, The Town, another one that he wrote. He's very good in Gone Girl. He is a good actor. But at this time, they decided two things. One, he was a bad actor, and two, that they were using the relationship of Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez to sell this film. I'm not going to go into it too much. If you go onto YouTube and type in Kevin Smith Jersey Girl, there's loads of quite interesting stories around the making of this film and the reaction and what happened. Particularly interesting story, if you're interested in comic books, in the making of this tied in with the making of Daredevil.
Okay.
The Ben Affleck Daredevil, obviously not the Marvel TV show. So
I assumed that, Josh. Yeah, we're talking about Ben.
So check that out. It's well worth a watch. But back to what I was saying, I think Ben Affleck is brilliant in this. He's funny when he needs to be funny. He's emotional when he needs to be emotional.
Yep.
He's paternal when he needs to be paternal, which is very important to the character. There's some really cute, funny bits. And the other issue I have with this film, which we'll come back to, which is not an issue I have with the film, but it's the marketing of the film. Because it's marketed as a romantic comedy.
It is.
Either between, you go, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, and they're together in real life. Or after that, what you've got is, you got the relationship between Ben Affleck and Liv Tyler, and they were together in Armageddon, and now they're together again. And, and oh my God, and haven't they got good chemistry? It's not a rom-com. It's a film about being a father, and this film was failed by that. For me, it was failed. It is a good film, in my opinion. It is a good film. It is a sweet film with a nice little message around being a father and being happy with what you've got. That's what it's about, and I really think Ben Affleck's performance is good in it. The cast overall are really good in it. I mean,
pretty strong.
Raquel Castro, who plays Gertrude, is brilliant in it.
Yeah,
quite often this doesn't mean to sound like a horrible thing, but as a generic point, quite often a poor child actor can take you out of a film and make you go, oh, they're not very good, are they?
Yeah, sometimes and it can be a bit irritating, can't it? But she was the irritating man. She was cool, she was confident, she was a little bit cocky. I liked it.
That's nothing against child actors. You're asking sometimes a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old to convey emotions that are well beyond anything bloody I ever knew when I was...
learn a script and take time off school and be on set for 12 hours a day. When
I was in drama club, when I was doing drama on a Saturday morning, all I wanted to do was fight scenes and gun scenes and running and jumping and pissing about. So if someone was like, listen, you're orphaned and you really wish you had a relationship with your mother who is absent.
You need to do a monologue.
So you need to you hate your dad because of this, this and this. I'd be like, yeah, but like guns and Batman and that. Like, do you know what I mean? So she is really, really good in this film.
I think
George Carlin, who plays Ben Affleck's dad in this, is really good. He is in Dogma. He plays the cardinal, the bishop in Dogma. He's really, really good. Liv Tyler's good in it as well. Overall, I think it's very, very well performed. I think it's really sweet. Like any Kevin Smith film, the dialogue is superb. It's the thing he does the best. It's just snappy. It's quippy. It's a mixture of quippy and snappy, but also feeling like things that real people would say. I really enjoy that. There is comedy in it, or again, back to what I was saying, it is not a rom-com. So if you're going into this thinking it's a rom-com, it isn't. It reminds me of of certain Woody Allen films. I think one of the things someone said in one of the Kevin Smith videos that I mentioned was that it's a little bit like his Annie Hall. If you've seen Annie Hall, it's his personal story, I guess. It's not that it's biographical, but it's him conveying some personal emotions, whether that be about loss of a relationship like Woody Allen's, like Annie Hall, or loss of a family member and his dad in Jersey Girl. So I'm going on and on. Sorry. What else? So you said it's all right. So obviously I'm guessing there's things you did and didn't like about it. So what did you like?
So I like a good story about grief. I like it as a topic. I think it's quite cathartic for a lot of people, not just for cathartic for the people working on it, but for people watching it as well.
Yeah,
like Reign Over Me, 50/50 are two of the best films I think that we've done on this podcast.
Oh, certainly.
And this is bringing you a different flavor of grief. I don't know if that's the right word, but you know what I mean? It's a different sort of thing.
It's not a story of grief you see all that often, really, because I suppose the subject of not to get too dark, but the subject of your partner dying in childbirth is probably one of those things that plenty of people have feared. And it is a bit of a taboo. It's not something people want to think about. The loss of a parent, a grandparent, is something that, unfortunately, most people have to deal with at some point in their life.
Yeah.
The loss of the kind that this film is talking about, it is not, and it's not something that a lot of people want to think about, really, is it?
Certainly. And I imagine it's one of the more, and obviously I don't know, I've been very fortunate. I haven't actually lost anybody like that close to me yet. But I imagine it's a very, very lonely grief. Like, you have lost the love of your life.
Yeah.
Like, she's gone, right? When, like you say, when you lose a parent, it's like, okay, but all my friends have, they've lost a parent, or they're going to lose a parent, or you've got siblings who have also lost their parent. You've got people that you can share the grief with. Even if you lose a child, you've got your partner. They've also lost a child. There's someone there to kind of catch you and to kind of share this grief with you. But when it's your spouse, I just feel like that must be the most isolating, most lonely form of grief. I mean, we saw Adam Sandler do it in Reign Over Me. Yeah. Like, he was a mess. He was an absolute mess over what happened.
And it's everybody's worst nightmare, isn't it? You've got this little baby. That is your responsibility now. You've got to raise it and care for it. There's no time for you to be sad about this awful, horrendous thing that has happened to you.
Yeah.
So get on with it, mate.
And that's kind of what he learns, isn't it? Because he starts out, and this is when he starts, his fatherhood isn't going so well because he's still trying to work. He's still trying to do the thing that he wants to do for himself. Yeah. But then it's as we go through the film that he realizes, oh no, actually, it isn't about me, because he does love her as well. He clearly loves Gertie. Yeah. But he doesn't express himself always in the right way, and he doesn't always make decisions that are necessarily in her best interests. It's more about him. But then he does grow, and we see this growth throughout the film, which is quite nice. I thought there was a few really funny moments in there. One of my favorites that really stood out is when Maya, who is Liv Tyler's character. So she and Ollie, Ben Affleck, are about to embark on a sexual relationship, shall we say. He tells her that he hasn't had sex in, I think it's 7 years, since his wife died. So she's like, right, well, we need to go and have sex right away then. So at first he's like really reluctant. He's like, no, I don't think so. And she's just like not taking no for an answer. I mean, if the roles had been reversed, male, female, that'd be a little bit weird. Yeah. It is weird. But he's into it, ultimately. And then they go back to his house. They think that Gertie is, going to be at school for the rest of the afternoon or whatever. But then she comes home. It's like, oh my God. So they hide in the shower and she catches them. So she brings, she like marches them downstairs and sits them on the sofa. And she's like, what are your intentions with my dad? Are you going to marry him and all this? And that made me laugh a bit, because it's a bit of a role reversal, isn't it? Because earlier in the film, we see Gertie with one of her male friends. They're sort of showing the genitals to each other, as kids do, kind of like, well, what's that? Why have you got that? What does that do, sort of thing? And then Ollie's like, what are your intentions with my daughter? Are you going to marry her? And just kind of cute, simple, low stakes humor where no one's getting hurt.
Like that. No, I enjoyed that as well. And another thing I liked as well, where some of the comedy comes from, which I enjoy, just about what you're saying there, is it's not afraid to show you a flawed character.
Mm.
So Ollie, as a man, is very flawed. He gets better as the film goes on, and it's all about him making the right choice for him and his daughter. But he is a flawed character, and some of the comedy comes from that as well. There is a bit that I particularly enjoy as well, which is not a comedy bit, but there's a bit where him and his daughter, she's like 8, are having this full-on stand-up row, and he literally tells her that he hates her.
Oh, yeah, he says,
I hate you till you ruin my life, or something like that.
Yeah, it's something that a child would say to a parent because they didn't let them stay up late or something. He says something like, it was you and your mother who ruined my life, or
I
something.
just want my life back, you little shit, or something like that.
It was horrendous.
And it's a thing that is an awful thing to say to a child, but I don't think there are many writers who are brave enough to show you that side of their protagonist than Kevin Smith. And I think that's really important to why I think that this film is good. At the end of the day, most of us, I don't know, I'm not speaking for everyone, we all love our parents, but parents are flawed, because when you're a kid, you think your parents are omniscient and they're perfect. And as you get older, and when you become an adult, when you become a parent, you realise that everyone is just essentially making it up as they go along. And I think that's quite important. I think that's really integral to the success of this film. Some great cameos in there as well. That's where I thought some of the comedy came as well. Like you said,
Matt Damon, who was so funny in it as just like this jerk off kind of publicist, because they're hiring, aren't they? So Ben Affleck goes for an interview and they're just like, nah. And I was so pleased that they dropped Will Smith in there.
Isn't it good that
bit? It's a running joke. If you haven't seen the film, it's a running joke throughout the Ben Affleck's character Ollie. So he's meant to be pushing out some good press about Will Smith or something, isn't he? So he's at this like huge press conference. There's loads of press and journalists in the audience, but he's got his kid there and he's trying to look after her, but he's not doing a very good job at it. So he just gets really angry, and then he starts kind of slagging off Will Smith, doesn't he? It's like,
as the Fresh Prince, he's like going, he'll never ever have a film career. Yeah.
He's nothing. He's not got talent and all this, and this haunts him throughout his career, doesn't it? Like he's trying to get a job with Matt Damon's company and stuff, and he's like, "You're the Will Smith guy," and he's like, "Oh, you're going to hire me?" It's like, not a chance. And people keep bringing it up, and then towards the end, he sat in like a
it's like a lobby, isn't it?
A lobby, that's the word. I was trying to think of the word. I nearly said porch. I was like, it's not a porch. So he sat in the lobby and he's waiting to go and get an interview. You know, he's got a job. Oh, because Jason Biggs, his mate, is lined up an interview for him. And he's sitting there, he's ready to go for the interview. He's like, oh, thank God, he's got a suit on his briefcase, he's ready to go. And then in walks Will Smith and sits next to him, and then they start having a conversation. And I just thought it was a brilliant moment. Like, it didn't feel cheap, it didn't feel forced, it didn't even feel that predictable. Like, because I didn't know Will Smith was in this, and I wasn't expecting that. So when he popped up, I was like, awesome, love it. Could this get any more 90s? So we'll move on then to talking about anything that we didn't like about the film, or anything that we would change. So, Josh, you've actually been quite passionate about this. You know, you've really stood in Ben Affleck's corner. You're really here fighting for this film. So, is there anything for you? Anything that didn't quite strike a chord?
Look, it's not perfect. I think I'm trying to look at it within the context of how the film was treated when it came out and the critical reception that I've seen when picking this film. I do think there's probably elements where Ollie as a character is almost a bit too much of an arsehole. So he's a little bit irredeemable in places, particularly he's not particularly nice to some of the female characters he works with at the beginning. I do understand that might be building a picture up that, like you mentioned, of a man who hasn't had many female influences in his life, but he is he's very rude to hospital staff. He's pretty much, for the first half an hour of the film, he's pretty much a dick to every female character he meets. It doesn't ruin the film for me, but I do think maybe one less incident of him being an arsehole could have been lost there. There's a bit of pacing issues. I think after about an hour, it's only about an hour 40, something like that. The pacing does fall out of it a lot. Back to my earlier point, I do think it's probably missing an even stronger female character. So the character who's in it the most, who's female, apart from his daughter, who's obviously a child, so I suppose adult female character, is Liv Tyler's character. And I think they do a really interesting thing with Liv Tyler's character, which is they portray her as a very young and sexually confident woman. And that's, again, there aren't that many writers who are as brave as Kevin Smith, who certainly at the time would be like, oh no, do you know what? Guess what? Women like having sex. Like, who'd have thought it? Do you know what I mean?
I know, shocker.
I know. And in this, I think they underused Liv Tyler a little bit. I think they could have put a little bit more character development in them, because if it wasn't for the fact that her and Ben Affleck have such good chemistry, I don't really know if that would add anything to the film. But the fact is they do have really good chemistry, and it does work. And the other point is just back to what I was saying, which is always touched on, which is the marketing, the poster of the film. It let it down. If you look at the poster, even the poster is Ben Affleck and his daughter like leaning up against the wall and folding arms and looking at each other, and it's like almost like a Disney Channel type film. Or the other side of it is they did. I think what happened, if I'm right, although don't quote me on this, is I think they tried the studio tried to capitalize on Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez's relationship. Then Geely came out, which was a massive failure, and I'm talking up there with the biggest critical flops of all time. So then what they did is they tried to sort of go back on that and try to make sure that it was clear that she was not the lead in the film, and that she was only in 10 minutes. So then what they did is they effectively gave away the twist that you mentioned before.
Okay.
So I think the trailer went from that to them being like, oh no, it is, she does die. And I think it ended up as a bit of a mess because the studio wouldn't commit to one thing or the other. I don't know, but that is what I've read. But ultimately, if you look at the marketing for the film, it makes it look like either a kid's film, bit of a cheeky comedy about a guy and his daughter, or a rom-com. It's neither of those films.
Neither of those things.
I think what it is like you say, it's quite a low-stakes story, and it's quite a human story about an issue, and it is about grief, and it is about fatherhood. And I think that would have been enough to sell the film, but unfortunately, as I've already said, it is a business, and they're probably going, look, Ben Affleck's in this, and he's handsome, and he's popular, and he's cool, so it's a rom-com or whatever, so go and watch it. You know, it's a date movie, it's a this movie. And actually, if you release this now, I think it would be done in a lot more of a savvy way, that you might go, no, actually, what this is a story about something. Whereas I think at the time, it was let down by that. But anyway...
Yeah.
That's a lot of words from me for a film I don't have much dislikes. So let's come to you. You said it was all right. So you've given me the sweet, give me the sour. What didn't you like about the film?
So this list isn't that long. Don't worry. You can stop sweating, Josh.
Whew.
But similar to your first point. So what I've put is that Ben Affleck does become a bit of a villain when he shouts at Gertie when they're having this argument about him wanting to go back to New York to work, and he says that thing about you and your mum ruined my life, like I want my life back but you and your mum ruined it, sort of thing. Up until that point, I was with him. I was with him. He wants to go and get a job, either his old job back or a job similar to the one he had, high powered, high stress, high money. And he wants to go back to New York to do it. It might not necessarily be what Gertie wants, but in his mind, it is what's best. It means he's going to be absolutely minted. He's going to be able to send her to a good school. It means she's going to be able to pay for college, and they're going to have top-notch healthcare. So I'm totally with him on that. And it's like, you can't let a 7-year-old dictate your life. It's like, oh, I don't want to move. I want to stay in New Jersey. And it's like, well, you're 7, so shut up, pack your suitcase, and off we go. But because of how kind of mean he got with it, you're just not on his side anymore in that moment.
So it's a bit too far, do you think?
It's just a bit mean, and to balance that, like what you said before, it's about showing these imperfect characters. It's about Kevin Smith, being brave to kind of show people doing this, to show a dad, being horrendous to his daughter who has lost her mother. So I kind of get that as well. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that's part of it. It's about presenting to us these flawed characters because, newsflash, people aren't perfect. So maybe I think I can accept it a bit more with that. But yeah, before that, I think the whole thing, because obviously it brings up some interesting sort of ideas and questions about, should you follow your own dreams if it is detrimental to other people's happiness? Because obviously his dad, so George Carlin, doesn't want him to move back to New York. Gertie also doesn't want to move. She wants to stay in New Jersey because she's got friends and she's got a school and all this, yada, yada, yada. But he needs to follow his own dream. This is what he thinks he wants. He wants to go back to that. So I supported him in that up until that point. The other thing as well, this didn't bother me massively, but it's just something I noticed. And I think this is, all to do with how far we've come, in the past 20 or so years. But some of the behavior of Liv Tyler's character, so Maya, around Ollie, if the genders were reversed, I think would paint a very, very different picture.
Yeah.
There's a lot of narrative, a lot of this thing come out in the kind of 90s and in the early 2000s, where if a woman does it, it's okay, but if a man did it, it's creepy. And obviously it's
40 Days and 40 Nights.
Exactly.
What's that? Exactly. So that was 2002, wasn't it? So that's 2 years before this. So it's still in that period, isn't it?
Exactly. So there's a bit of that, she finds his address by obviously checking his membership card to the video shop that she works at. That's a bit weird. When he says that he hasn't had sex in 7 years, she's just like, bam, right, well, let's go. We need to have sex right now. That's a bit like he's vulnerable in that moment. Like he's just, first of all, he's just met you, right? The last woman he had sex with was someone that he was married to and deeply in love with. Why are you just assuming, just because you couldn't go 7 years without sex, that he must really be struggling? He's obviously not struggling that much, because if he wanted to, he's a good-looking fella. He could go to the club. And I'm sure he would have no problem.
It's not a dry spell, is it? It's not like, I can't get a date. It's literally like, I haven't been with someone else because I am grieving. And
he doesn't care. He's still in love with the dead woman. I don't actually want to be with someone else, because why would I? I want the one person I absolutely cannot have. Yeah, exactly. And, it's all played off as fun and, it's, whatever. But he's obviously fine with it in the end. So then I am now fine with it, because he is fine with it. He is not scarred from it. He's, he doesn't try and push her away. He does say no a few times at the beginning, but then he eventually goes for it. And he's clearly into it by the end. And, then they do get together and it's all, very nice and happily ever after. And she gets on well with Gertie, and that's very nice. And then, other than that, just that it just didn't blow me away.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was amazing, but it's not a bad film.
It's all right, yeah.
Yeah.
Put it on you put it on, you're looking for something to watch, you put it on. It's a sort of film, I like it a lot, but I know that reaction to film where you Saturday night, you think, should we put a film on? Put a film on. And it finishes and you both go, it was all right, yeah. But neither of you have anything to say about it. Yeah. You just both go, but it's all right,
yeah, it's fine. It didn't piss me off. I didn't feel... it wasn't like offensively bad. I wasn't like angry scribbling notes down or anything, but I wasn't passionately writing notes down either. So
and I've had that reaction. So I can't remember what was the one you it was a while ago now. It might have been Not All Dogs Go to Heaven.
Oh yeah, definitely lukewarm.
There was one that you picked and I was like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like it's just not, and that's almost the worst reaction in some ways. It's certainly the one you want the least when you're doing a podcast, because at least if you really don't like something or you really do like something, you go, I love this conversation. I fucking hated this. Whereas if you just go, it's fine. So,
it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. So in conclusion, it's fine. Yeah.
Right then, it's time to move on to the critical reception, something that I haven't seen because Josh is going to surprise me with it. Now then, you were quite open at the beginning about the fact that you think this is underrated because it got ruined, destroyed, completely battered when it came out. So interesting. So if I'm going to guess at what the critical reception got, because of what you said, it's got to be under a 5, right? Got to be under a 5. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna say like a 4.5. I'm gonna say 4.6, just to see if I can be like proper precise. I say 4.6, but I would give it higher than that. Yeah. I think you're at least looking at like a middle 6, at least like a 6.5, 6.6.
That is a proper. It's all right. Score,
it's all right. It was fine.
It's fine, yeah. It's not offensive.
Funny. Yeah, good actors. Cool.
Okay, so we've got that in mind. So this is make or break now. So let's have a look, because I've got it in front of me. So at the time of recording on IMDb, now bearing in mind this is reflective of an audience score, really. Mm-hmm. It gets 6.2.
Okay.
However, on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience give it 48%.
Okay.
And the critics give it 43%.
Oh, okay. Hey, I I'm more pleased about how close my guess was.
Yeah, so your guess is pretty good there. And I do think, if I'm honest, time has probably been kinder to this film than when it came out. Because I think Kevin Smith has quite a following of people who watch his films.
Well, I think us too.
Us too, yeah. Your husband.
Yeah, there's loads of us out there.
He's got quite a following through his podcast, through the fact that he's got a lot of sort of brushstrokes, hasn't he? He does comics, he does writing, he does podcasts. Yeah. He is sort of a comedian of sorts when he does his Q&As. Like, I've got some of his Q&A DVDs, and they're really quite funny. They're sort of like stand-up. They're like stand-up DVDs, really, where the content is dictated by questions. So I think that that's probably brought that score up. 43% is probably more reflective of how I think it did at the time. And probably, if anything, I think it did probably a little bit worse, really, at the time. Because it did get a kick in when it came out. So, I mean, what do you think? So you've given it a sort of middle 6, and we're looking at the mid 40s if you average out those Rotten Tomatoes scores. I mean, that's underrated? Is it?
I think it is a bit underrated, yeah. Even if you just think a bit, I think going deep into the fours there, especially like 43, like that's a bad film, really, isn't it?
And that is rotten. You know, on Rotten Tomatoes, that gives it the little splodgy tomato thing.
Exactly.
That is bad. You know, we've talked about the film. I have a lot of affection for the film. I've made my case. It is flawed for the reasons that we've talked about. But one of the things that they did say in the criticisms that I read was that it's a bit overly sentimental and a bit overly cheesy and a bit like schmaltzy. I just think, you know, I think you've got to be pretty cold to not be taken in by some of the elements of this film. I don't think it is overly cheesy and overly sentimental.
I don't think it's overly cheesy. And also, it's about the right amount of cheese for the kind of film that it is, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is. So for me, that's harsh, that's underrated. So are we saying it's underrated?
Yes, Josh, we're saying it's underrated. Jersey Girl is underrated.
So there we go. Another underrated film in the vault, and I'm happy. I'm happy with that one, Alice.
Glad I could do that for you, Josh.
There are films that you really care about and you want them in there. There are hills you want to die on, and that's one of mine.
Okay. Well, there you go. I'll let you have it.
So, yes, and thank you very much for listening to this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch with us, the email address is filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. If you just search for Just Films and That, then you'll find us. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc. We're also on your televisions, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday evening from 6 p.m, you can catch us on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. You can also find us on Channel 195 on Sky, and I'm pretty sure that's across the country. So that's every Friday night from 6 p.m, and sometimes Mondays as well.
Yeah, so there you go. So we will be back next week with another film that we think is underrated or seen. You know the drill. Alice, thank you very much for joining me as ever.
Thank you, Josh. It was a pleasure as always.
And it's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.